Here in the background is a PC known as Darth Jar Jar. Well, actually I'm going to be calling it now Scuffed Jar Jar because this build originally was a custom water build that I did here on the channel over a year ago. And since then, I haven't really used it much. And you guys have critiqued us about why haven't you used this PC? What's going on? It was a beautiful build. It had a dual Xeon SR2 motherboard, and it was just really like represented Tech Yes City a lot. And yeah, I loved the build until after using it for about 10 hours, I came into this problem where the pump was just making this really loud noise. So in today's video, we're going to go through my experience and vlog about pulling this thing apart and making it into a usable PC that I can use here at Tech Yes City, and also in the process talk about, I guess, the dangers of custom water cooling. So let's roll that intro and then get into the vlog. So this right here is Darth Jar Jar, my custom water-cooled build that was built over a year ago. It was actually been about a year and a half since its first inception, and it was an awesome build until this water pump basically started making some really bad noise, and I'll let you guys take a quick listen to that. So you can just hear it there. It's this annoying noise, and it just drives me nuts. So like basically the problem with this is too, in order for me to replace this pump, because I'm told it's faulty, in order for me to replace it, I've got to pull everything apart and put it back in again. And there's no guarantee that the next pump that I put in could have some problems as well. So this is, I guess, the dark side with Darth Jar Jar, the dark side of water cooling. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to empty this loop out, and I'm going to start pulling this thing all apart, because I do want a PC as a secondary PC, and I want it to kind of be like a Xeon system. So I might be just changing it over and doing a quick fix today with the hopes of maybe ordering in some custom parts again to fix up this loop for a later day. But first things first, we're going to turn this thing off, empty out the loop, which we've got a drain right here, and then we're going to start pulling it all apart. So we've now pulled apart Darth Jar Jar in all its glory, but this is the masterpiece and the heart of the build, the SR2 motherboard, bigger than EATX motherboards. This was a special size in its own, so it required a special case to begin with, or at least the modding of a case to fit it properly. However, one thing about this motherboard is it's probably honestly worth more working condition and just sitting on a shelf being a collector's item than me actually using it. So because it's so rare, there was only a limited number of these made, and they actually do overclock Xeons and 2 CPUs. Like, it's the last generation of dual Xeon overclocking, or even I think 2 CPU together overclocking, which makes it such a special board. So we're going to sideline that and then get over to the case right now and talk about what's going on over here and how we're going to approach this build right now. So now here's what's left of the build at the moment. I've had to take the rad off the top, rad out the front. I've taken the pump out. That all took a while because it was just so, I guess, cluttered in there, and there were so many cables that I've had to pull out, extra cables that I actually didn't need. And that was even with the SR2 to begin with, because all those extra connections on the SR2 are mainly for quad SLI, and since we're only using a single GPU, we actually didn't need all those extra wires. So what I'm going to do now is try and piece together the original mounts for an ATX board and add a rear exhaust fan, and then try and get that mounted, and then see what I can do here to rebuild Scuffed Jar Jar. But also there's all the water cooling parts. I just put them in a bucket, so if there's any water still inside any of those parts, I guess they'll just come out overnight. And I mean, I can use that stuff except the pump. The pump's gone, I know that. So some of the other parts I'm sure I could utilize, but I also need to go to the hardware store and get a special Allen key for the block on the 980 Ti too, to remove that. And now we've rebuilt Darth Jar Jar with a lot more room inside. It's a bit spacious here now. We've got a 140mm exhaust fan. We've got a 5700 XT upgrade from the 980 Ti. We've changed the cables because I had this cable set around here. I've had it for like years. It's blue and black cable set, matches the build perfectly. And we've also just got scuffed like wires hanging everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I could do some cable management, or I could kind of like, since the whole thing, like this whole thing is just banged up. I mean, there's just panels, like panels are misaligned. Things don't fit properly, even at the front. Bits are falling off it. So USB slots are missing up the top. I'm just thinking like I might as well just don't do cable management. Scuff this thing up a little bit harder. Maybe just put some thermal paste here and just smudge it on. We'll just do that a little bit. You know, like just in name of, like sort of just like Death Star 2 sort of thing. Like, so there we go. We'll just smudge a bit of thermal paste on there just to sort of like give it a nice authentic look. And so this is what it's going to look like now. And I guess we can boot this thing up.
And finally, we are back on a used Xeon at Tech Yes City. Now, this one, for me personally, is a little more special than the SR2. And you're going to think, what? The SR2 is dual Xeons. And the reason why, for me personally, is because I pulled this motherboard in the background here out of a dumpster. And I bent the pins back and I got it working again. So I'll put the specs up on the screen for you guys. But a setup like this can do everything that the latest and greatest setup can do. The 1680 V2 is nothing to laugh at when you overclock it. Really good performance. A 5700 XT, really good card in its own right. The only thing you're really missing is, I guess, RTX voice if you're streaming, which that is really powerful. Believe me, it's a really good tool if you've got a lot of background noise. But of course, the way to get around that is to not have background noise. And so you'll notice that the Taichi, the 5700 XT that we're using, in idle mode, and even when you're gaming, it's really quiet. And that's the good thing about that. Same with the H115i RGB Platinum. Both really good parts. Even though Corsair and ASRock are channel sponsors here, I'd be using both these components in any build any day of the week. Though besides that, we've got cheap monitors here. Like I'm using a P191W Acer monitor. I got this off Les for 15 bucks. And I've got a 17-inch monitor, which someone just gave me. They said they don't even want it anymore. It's a dumb, I'm like, hey, I'll make a use for that monitor. Though in the next video, we'll talk about streaming setups and how you can get into it for cheap without having to go and buy a $500 motherboard, because there are some things to look out for, like USB ports cutting out and stuff if you're overloading them, especially on cheap motherboards. So we'll talk about all that in the next video. Let's get on to water cooling and the dangers of it, and also, I guess, the big negatives. First of all is the cost. That's a no-brainer, right? Like you're looking at the costs of a custom water-cooled build. All the parts, they're usually from niche manufacturers, and when you've got niche manufacturers making these parts, they're not going to be able to source the materials with economies of scale. And so what this means is that, say for instance, you've got Corsair selling 10,000 all-in-one liquid coolers versus, say, a manufacturer making a water pump reservoir combo. Say for instance, they're using the same pump. Since Corsair's selling so much more of them, they're going to be ordering a lot more. And so they're going to be getting a discount versus the niche manufacturer. And so that in itself is going to raise costs alone when it comes to custom water cooling parts. Then of course, there's making the custom parts, whether it's a water block or whatnot. Because they have to custom design those water blocks for the latest and greatest graphics cards, that stuff costs money. So generally when you want to make a custom water cooled build, you're going to be looking at a lot more money to be outlaid. And then as we saw with this build today, if something goes wrong, you're going to have to spend so much more time to get that build to work properly. And so that was the thing that frustrated me the most today, was I outlaid all this cash for Darth Jar Jar, spent heaps of time with Ethan from Tag Mods making this thing, and then I was just met with, after 10 hours of use, like literally after I did the video on the performance and overclocking, I was met with a pump that just started making this weird, eerie sound. And so maybe it's got to do with the pump not being able to supply water to a 480 mil and a 240 mil rad in the same loop. Who knows? But the bottom line is I would have had to have gone out, buy a new pump, and still pull this whole build apart because the pump was the last thing I could get to. So it was just designed in that way. And I guess when it was designed, we never thought the pump would go, especially so quickly. So I would have had to pull it all apart like I did, put a new pump in, refill it, and then of course I run new risks coming in, whether there could be a leak or something like that, and I might have to do this 12 months later. So having a custom water-cooled build is a cool thing in that it looks great. It's going to look so much better than a lot of pre-built PCs. But there's so much more that goes into it. So I will be having another custom build with the Z490 Aqua coming on. I'm going to be collabing with another YouTuber. We're going to make a custom build for you guys. But when it comes down to it, I'm not a big fan of custom water-cooled builds, especially if you're going to use it as your main computer. And especially if you've got to do work on it. Just consider that if something goes wrong, there could be a lot of downtime. And if you can't afford that downtime, especially if you're working with it, and it's making you money as your job, then I would caution very lightly with going with custom water-cooled builds. So for me now, I've got another setup. I got this setup here. I got my main rig. So if something goes wrong between one of the rigs, I can still get videos edited. I can still do work. So basically for me personally, going forward with custom water-cooled builds, I'm going to tread very lightly, of course. But on top of that, I'm going to make sure any build that I do, it's got a easy to access pump and reservoir which I can change out. So if something goes wrong, I can just maybe empty the loop and then just change that part without having to do too much extra work. And so that's something I've learned personally from this build and everything involved. Another thing I've learned too is that definitely when I get another pump for this build, because I got recommended this pump for Darth Jar Jar, so I had no idea, but in the next build I do, I'm going to go and make sure that I get like the best pump reservoir you can get, whether it's $400 or $500, because if you're going to do this stuff, I'd recommend just getting the best stuff, because you're already, if you're going with a custom water-cooled build, your price performance is already out the window. At this stage, you're just going for the aesthetics and I guess the extra cooling performance, which you are going to get, but your price performance is just out the window. And you definitely want to get something that's going to last and work properly, or at least I'd hope you would. And so that's something I've learned personally out of Darth Jar Jar. And so going forward, I'm really going to make a note to get the best stuff if I do a custom water-cooled build in the future. Anyhow, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button for us. Also, let us know what you think of the new setup. I want to do more news videos and stuff like that, and just quick sort of off-the-cuff videos where I can get you guys news and important news, and especially tutorials and stuff like that, done a lot easier than I otherwise would, recording off a DSLR through a memory card and then editing in Adobe Premiere Pro. So hopefully this setup is nice. The microphone sounds good. This will be my first time hearing it back. But also do let us know in the comments section below, what's your personal experience or opinions on custom water cooling setups? Do you like going that route, or do you like going, say, with the all-in-ones, or do you like going with air cooling? On that note as well, have you delved into used custom water cooling? Something that I've never done, something that I kind of probably want to stay away from, especially after seeing this water pump and how it went bad. And pretty much, I don't think it's going to be easy to replace. I think you just got to get a new one. Though, do let us know. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Heclanet. And they asked, did you say AMD motherboard or Intel? I mean, because the prices look like Intel. This is in the previous video we did on the B550 ASRock Phantom Gaming ITX motherboard. This motherboard, it's coming at $200 US, and you'll notice with B550, the prices are higher than they're used to being. And that's because they got the PCIe 4, they've got all the chipset costs more essentially with B450. But another thing I've noticed too, is that this time around, a lot of the B550s are able to run those 16 core chips. And so for me, it feels like there's this prerequisite with B550 where the manufacturers have to put in all this extra componentry, and that's raising the cost. So I would like to see AMD perhaps make a B530 or some type of new motherboard where it's targeted towards 4 cores and 8 cores, and people who just want to maybe overclock a 6 core or something like that. And so you don't have to go out and spend all this extra money on a B550 versus a B530 that would have, say, PCIe 4 on board. It has all the new features and its upgradability is there for the next generation chips. Because at the moment, B450 is the value king. Same with A320 if you don't mind not overclocking. And you get a decent one, of course, and you're just coupling with a 4 or 6 core. But in terms of them making a new refresh of B450, I think the potential is definitely there to do that and maybe even add PCIe 4.0 in with something like a B530 motherboard lineup. I think that'd be cool. But until then, yes, the motherboards are going to be overpriced because at least what I've tested with B550 is they're all running 16 cores. Anyhow, to answer the question directly, yes, I did say AMD motherboard in that video. Hope that answers that question. And if you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that content, you want to see the moment it drops, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.